The sun had barely begun its climb over the turquoise horizon, spilling streaks of gold across the glass towers and sandy beaches surrounding the Azure Crest Resort. The resort, perched like a jewel on a private stretch of the Caribbean coast, was a palace of marble and polished teak. The scent of fresh linen mingled with the salty ocean air, drifting down the halls where chandeliers sparkled and gilded mirrors reflected the gentle morning light. The luxury was palpable, the kind that made ordinary lives feel almost invisible. Among the throng of early risers and staff hustling to ensure perfection, Lila Vermeer, 26, moved quietly. Her uniform was simple, a crisp white blouse tucked into navy slacks, apron pristine and hair tied back. But it couldn't mask her intelligence, discipline, or the quiet pride in her precise movements. To the guests, she was invisible, a blur of efficiency, someone who dusted, cleaned, and disappeared without a trace. Yet beneath the surface of her calm composure was a mind sharper than most, a soul molded by years of hardship and ambition, and a secret skill few would ever guess. She spoke 5 languages fluently. Dutch was her latest conquest. Lila had arrived at the resort 2 years prior, debt weighing her down like an anchor and the memory of her mother's illness pressing relentlessly in her chest. She had dreamed of a better life, but circumstance had forced her to trade ambition for survival. Still, she had never let go of her passion for learning. Every night after long shifts scrubbing floors, she would sit under the faint glow of her bedside lamp in her tiny apartment, practicing vocabulary, reciting grammar rules, and perfecting the nuances of pronunciation. Dutch, in particular, had enchanted her, the melodic rhythm, the sharp consonants, the precision. She had even formed a virtual mentorship with Dr. Peter van Linden, a visiting linguist from Amsterdam, whose praise and guidance had been a beacon in her otherwise ordinary life. This morning, like every morning, she began with the 5th floor. She methodically moved from room to room, her movements synchronized, almost balletic. Pillows were fluffed to perfection, bathroom tiles scrubbed until they gleamed, silver trays polished until they shone like mirrors. The guests, foreign dignitaries, wealthy vacationers, and jet-setting executives, moved around her, oblivious to the silent efficiency that maintained their paradise. Lila had long learned the art of invisibility. Being noticed was dangerous. Being judged was exhausting. Better to clean, smile, and retreat into quiet excellence. Then came the phone call. It was subtle at first, a soft trill from the staff lounge near the penthouse suite. Lila wiped her hands on her apron and picked up the receiver. On the other end, her mentor's voice crackled through. Heart hammering, she switched seamlessly into Dutch. Words flowed naturally, effortlessly, each syllable precise. The conversation was both formal and intimate, a mix of instruction, encouragement, and quiet celebration. Her mentor congratulated her on her certification, professional fluency, recognized officially. Lila's cheeks flushed, a small smile breaking across her usually composed face. Years of early mornings, late nights, and relentless study had paid off. Unbeknownst to her, Sebastian Drake, billionaire owner of the resort and CEO of the globally renowned hospitality empire Drake Lux Holdings, had been walking the corridor moments earlier. He had come down to check on the property himself, as he often did, blending into the space like a shadow, but observing every detail. He was 6 feet tall, imposing, and meticulously dressed in a tailored navy suit with subtle silver cufflinks, his dark hair streaked with grey at the temples. His expression was unreadable, a mask honed over decades of deals, betrayals, and calculated perfection. He paused in the corridor, captivated by the sound of Dutch on the other end of the line. Not the usual stilted tourist attempts at language. This was flawless, natural, confident. Sebastian's eyes narrowed, a flicker of curiosity piercing his usual stoic demeanor. He leaned against the polished wooden frame of the doorway, listening intently. Every syllable, every inflection of her voice told him a story about the woman on the line. She wasn't just a hotel cleaner, she was intelligent, poised, disciplined, and talented in ways he hadn't expected. His curiosity, rarely piqued these days, was now fully engaged. Lila, oblivious to the billionaire's presence, laughed softly in Dutch, delighting in the compliment from her mentor. She recited phrases she had memorized for months, weaving complex sentences effortlessly. The sound of her voice was like music to someone attuned to nuance, elegant, measured, alive with confidence. Sebastian straightened, taking a deliberate step forward. He rarely acted on impulse, but something about this quiet display of talent demanded his attention. It wasn't merely her skill, it was her poise under pressure, her ability to handle recognition without arrogance, her humility, and the way she carried herself in a world that often overlooked her. He made a silent note. This was someone worth watching. The conversation ended, and Lila's hand trembled slightly as she replaced the receiver. She exhaled, the adrenaline of achievement still coursing through her veins. "I did it," she whispered to herself, eyes misting. Years of struggle, sacrifice, and silent dedication had culminated in this moment, a private victory, unobserved by anyone but her mentor. Sebastian retreated silently, unseen, and made a decision that would alter the course of her life. He would act tomorrow, not today, not immediately. Let the intrigue simmer. Let the universe arrange the perfect moment for revelation. In his mind, he calculated the risk, the reward, and the potential for discovering someone of extraordinary talent in the most mundane of roles. Meanwhile, Lila returned to her duties, unaware that the very person whose presence she had once only imagined in boardrooms and glossy magazines had just witnessed her brilliance. She wiped down the brass fixtures in the penthouse suite, arranged the linens with meticulous care, and hummed softly in Dutch to herself, a private melody of triumph and hope. The luxury resort carried on as if nothing had happened. Guests strolled along the balconies, servers carried trays of fresh fruit and champagne, and the sun climbed higher, igniting the ocean in sparkling fire. Yet, in the silence of the corridor, a silent observation had been made, a seed planted. By the time Lila finished her rounds, she had no idea that tomorrow morning would bring a summons that would jolt her from anonymity into the orbit of one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the world. She only knew the satisfaction of a skill mastered, a goal achieved, and the quiet pride of integrity and perseverance recognized, even if only by herself and her mentor. As she turned the final corner, dusting a golden-framed mirror, she caught her reflection. For the first time, she saw more than a maid. She saw potential. She saw resilience. She saw a future she had fought for in the quiet hours, long after the resort's guests had fallen asleep. Sebastian, across the resort's marble courtyard, observed the same figure in a way few ever had. He wasn't impressed merely by skill, he was captivated by character. In a world where almost everyone had a price, where ambition often corrupted, where appearances masked motives, here was someone authentic, self-driven, and brilliant in ways that mattered. And so, the scene was set. The ordinary had intersected with the extraordinary. The invisible had been noticed. The hidden spark, a conversation in Dutch, would ignite a series of events that neither Lila nor Sebastian could have foreseen. As the last beams of sunlight glimmered across the infinity pool, Lila pushed the cleaning cart down the hall for the final time that morning. She hummed a melody in Dutch, unaware that it had carried across space directly into the mind of a man who controlled billions. A man who had already decided, "Tomorrow I will see you again." The tension lingered, electric and unspoken, like the calm before a storm. Audiences watching the story unfold would feel it. The quiet anticipation, the power imbalance, the promise of transformation. They would wonder, what would happen when the billionaire confronted the maid? How would she react? Could her hidden talent truly change the course of her life? Every detail mattered. the soft swish of the mop, the gleam of polished marble, the faint smell of sea air, the confident intonation of Dutch, the silent observation of a man used to controlling everything yet powerless in the face of genuine talent. The ordinary, the routine, and the mundane had become extraordinary, all because of one private skill that had remained unnoticed until this moment. Tomorrow, Lila would be summoned to the office. A figure of authority, power, and immense wealth would stand before her, silently weighing her worth. Would her talent be recognized? Would she rise to the challenge or crumble under pressure? The audience would feel every heartbeat, every moment of anticipation, and every glimmer of hope. The morning sun spilled across the marble floors of the Azure Crest Resort, catching in the gold inlays of the grand lobby and making the polished surfaces sparkle as if anticipating the day's drama. Lila Vermeer had arrived early, as she always did, moving quietly through the corridors with the practiced precision of a ghost. Her white blouse pressed, navy slacks impeccable, apron tied neatly at her waist, she went about her rounds in silent efficiency, as though the world of luxury around her was completely separate from her own reality. Her mind, however, was elsewhere. Ever since yesterday's phone call, when she had spoken Dutch with flawless fluidity to her mentor, Dr. Peter van Linden, Lila had been restless. She replayed the conversation in her head again and again, each syllable echoing with the satisfaction of years of study paying off. Her heart had swelled with pride, but it had also been punctuated by an undercurrent of anxiety, the unmistakable presence of someone powerful, listening, observing, evaluating. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she wasn't ready to comprehend. As she dusted the intricate carvings along the railing of the fifth-floor balcony, the faint hum of staff activity below mingled with the distant crash of waves against the private beach. Everything seemed ordinary, just another morning at the resort, but a subtle tension coiled in her chest. Something was coming, something that would disrupt the quiet order of her existence. She couldn't yet see it, but instinct told her she was on the brink of something momentous. That moment arrived sooner than expected. A soft, deliberate clearing of the throat behind her made her freeze mid-swipe. Lila turned to see Mrs. Valerie Green, the resort's HR director, standing in the doorway of the staff corridor. She was composed, professional, yet there was a peculiar glint in her eyes that Lila couldn't quite interpret. "Lila," Mrs. Green began, her tone careful, measured, almost conspiratorial. "Human Resources would like to see you, now." Lila's stomach dropped, her pulse quickened. "Now?" she repeated, trying to keep her voice steady, her hands gripping the edge of the railing. "Yes," Mrs. Green said, "it's important." The walk to the HR office felt like an eternity. The polished floors reflected her anxious expression back at her, a pale reminder of the uncertainty she faced. The corridors seemed longer, the sunlight harsher, the gentle sounds of the resort, a bellhop laughing, the clink of breakfast trays, suddenly distant and surreal. With every step, 1,000 questions whirled through her mind. What had she done wrong? Was there a mistake on her payroll? Had someone filed a complaint? Or, though she barely allowed herself to hope, could it be related to yesterday? Could someone have actually noticed her? The HR office door loomed before her, its mahogany surface polished to perfection. She knocked gently, and a soft voice called, "Come in." Lila pushed open the door to see Mrs. Green seated behind her desk, the sunlight catching the silver-framed photos on the wall, images of board meetings, gala events, and the occasional celebrity guest. There was a small stack of folders on the corner of the desk, yet none of it drew her attention. Her gaze was immediately drawn to the calm, precise composure of Mrs. Green. "Please have a seat," Mrs. Green said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Lila did as instructed, hands clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Her mind raced, 100 possible scenarios playing out in rapid succession. Mrs. Green leaned forward slightly, her voice softening. "Lila, this morning Mr. Drake requested a meeting with you, effective immediately. Lila's heart leapt. Sebastian Drake. The name alone carried weight, power, and intimidation. Her mind struggled to comprehend. Why her? Why now? You, Mrs. Green hesitated, choosing her words with care. He has specifically requested that you be reassigned. You'll be moving into a newly created position within the hotel, one that will allow you to utilize skills he personally observed. Lila blinked, confusion and disbelief mingling in her eyes. Skills? He observed. But I'm just… housekeeping. I mean… She trailed off, uncertain how to articulate the flood of emotion. Mrs. Green smiled faintly, recognizing both her confusion and her hope. He heard you speaking Dutch yesterday. He was impressed, not just by your fluency, but by your composure, your professionalism, and your integrity. He wants you to assist in our international guest relations department, particularly with high-profile guests who don't speak English. Lila felt as though the floor had been pulled out from under her. Her mind raced to process the enormity of the words. International guests, Dutch-speaking investors, high-level diplomacy. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a leap into a world she had never imagined for herself. You mean like translating for billionaires and diplomats? She asked, voice barely audible. Yes, he says, Mrs. Green said, and much more. You'll assist in cultural coordination, client relations, and strategic meetings. This position comes with a significant increase in salary, benefits, and visibility. Mr. Drake believes your talents have been overlooked. He has created this role because he sees potential in you. Talent that should not remain hidden in housekeeping. The words seemed surreal. Lila's mind spun as she tried to reconcile her identity as a quiet, diligent maid with the image of herself standing in boardrooms, interacting with executives, guiding negotiations, and representing one of the most exclusive resorts in the world she had occupied for years, filled with brooms, mops, and the quiet anonymity of labor, seemed suddenly irrelevant. A new reality shimmered just beyond the veil of her ordinary life. Effective today, Mrs. Green added, you'll report to Mr. Drake directly. He wants to see you in his office after lunch to discuss your responsibilities and the upcoming assignments. Do you understand? Yes, Lila whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Her hands were clammy, her heart pounding, and a flood of emotions. Fear, excitement, hope, disbelief washed over her in waves. I understand. She left the HR office with her mind reeling. Every detail of the resort, the ornate chandeliers, the polished floors, the soft rustle of staff uniforms, looked different. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper, every motion around her charged with possibility. She walked past guests she had served countless times without notice and for the first time felt truly visible. By noon, she had prepared herself, rehearsed her greeting, and calmed her nerves. She wore a tailored navy skirt and cream blouse, subtle jewelry, and her hair tied back neatly. This was no longer the uniform of invisibility. It was a uniform of presence and readiness. She approached the executive wing, the elevator gliding upward silently, carrying her to a future she barely dared to imagine. The office door opened before her, revealing Sebastian Drake in the flesh. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretching beneath him like a mosaic of ambition and wealth. His gaze shifted from the skyline to her. And for a moment, silence hung between them, charged and potent. You look ready, he said, voice low, measured, yet not unkind. His piercing eyes evaluated her, not as a maid, not as an employee, but as a person, a mind, a presence, a potential force. I think so, Lila replied, voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. She felt the surreal weight of the moment pressing down, but also an unexpected calm, a clarity born from years of preparation and quiet ambition. Sebastian gestured to the seat across from him. Sit, let's talk. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Lila had experienced. There were no lectures, no condescension. He explained the responsibilities, the importance of cultural nuance, the role she would play in negotiations, and the expectations for professionalism, discretion, and intelligence. Yet beneath the business, there was something more. A recognition, a trust, a subtle challenge. He spoke not as a billionaire boss, but as a man seeking someone exceptional, someone who could navigate worlds he couldn't manage alone. Every question he asked, every scenario he presented, revealed not only the weight of his empire, but also the vulnerability he rarely showed to anyone. "You'll need to be confident, discreet, and empathetic," he said. "We're dealing with people who have everything but often understand little about integrity or loyalty. That's where you come in. Your insight, your skill, your judgment. These are rare qualities." Lila nodded, absorbing the gravity of her new role. Fear lingered, but it was now entwined with exhilaration. This was not merely a job, it was recognition, validation, and an opportunity to step fully into her potential. By the time the meeting ended, Lila walked out of the executive office transformed. The world felt wider, brighter, and brimming with possibility. She wasn't just a maid, she was a professional, an interpreter of nuance, a bridge between worlds. And for the first time, someone of immense power had seen her, not just her skills, but her character, her resilience, and her integrity. The first encounter with Sebastian Drake had set the stage. The billionaire had not only recognized her talent, but he had invited her into his world. And as she returned to her duties, she couldn't shake the awareness that this was only the beginning. Lila's first day in her new role begins. She will stand in the room with Dutch investors and high-profile clients, tasked with translation, diplomacy, and intuition. The morning light poured through the expansive glass facade of the Azure Crest Resort Executive Wing, cascading across the plush carpets, gilded furniture, and polished mahogany tables. Lila Vermeer walked briskly along the corridor, her heels clicking in rhythm with her heartbeat, a sound that echoed louder in her own mind than anywhere else. Today was the day, the moment she had been thrust into by Sebastian Drake himself. A day she had imagined countless times during her nights spent mopping floors, dusting chandeliers, and studying Dutch grammar. She was no longer merely a maid. Her uniform of invisibility had been replaced by a tailored navy skirt, cream silk blouse, and polished leather pumps. Her hair, pulled back into a precise bun, framed a face now sharpened by confidence and nerves alike. Her name tag no longer read Housekeeping Leela, but International Guest Relations Associate, a title that carried weight she was only beginning to comprehend. The elevator doors opened with a quiet hum, and she stepped into the executive suite for the first time under her new authority. The office was larger than any hotel room she had ever cleaned. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the city's skyline, sunlight reflecting off the glass of neighboring towers. Every detail, the crisp lines of the furniture, the subtle scent of polished wood, the muted hum of air conditioning, screamed professionalism and power. Standing at the window, Sebastian Drake's figure cut a commanding silhouette, dark hair with silver streaks, tailored navy suit, no tie. The way he carried himself spoke of decades of disciplined leadership. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his gaze evaluating, steady and penetrating. "You're early," he said, voice calm yet carrying weight. "I wanted to be on time," Lila replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Her hands trembled slightly, though she hid it behind her back. Sebastian nodded approvingly. "Good. Confidence is the first tool you'll need today. Are you ready for your first real assignment?" "Yes, sir," she whispered, a mixture of excitement and nerves coursing through her. He gestured toward the long conference table where several men had already gathered. Their faces were unfamiliar, but carried the unmistakable aura of authority. Crisp suits, perfectly polished shoes, and eyes that measured, judged, and calculated. Dutch investors, she realized, her mind racing to prepare for translation, interpretation, and diplomacy, all at once. You'll be translating for them, Sebastian said, stepping closer, but it's more than language. You need to interpret intention, convey nuance, and manage the subtle dynamics of cross-cultural communication. Don't just translate words, translate meaning. Lila swallowed hard, nodding. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but had never imagined the weight it carried. Each step she took toward the table felt deliberate, rehearsed in her mind countless times. She took her seat beside Sebastian, straightening her back, ensuring her posture radiated confidence. The lead investor, a tall, sharp-eyed man with steel grey hair and a commanding presence, leaned forward. Good morning, Mr. Drake. We've heard much about the Azure Crest Resort's plans for European expansion. Before we discuss numbers, we would like to understand your philosophy, your approach. Sebastian nodded. Thank you. We believe in combining luxury with authenticity, providing experiences that respect culture while delivering unparalleled service. Lila's voice emerged quietly, precise, and confident as she translated into Dutch. Dank u, wij geloven in het combineren van luxe met authenticiteit en het bieden van ervaringen die cultuur respecteren en tegelijkertijd ongeëvenaarde service leveren. The investor's brow furrowed slightly, a subtle indication that the literal translation wasn't enough. Lila adjusted her approach, softening tones, adding cultural context. We focus on creating not just luxury, but meaningful engagement. Our guests should feel both at home and inspired by local traditions. Sebastian's eyes flicked toward her, a silent affirmation that she had captured the essence. Her heart raced, but she maintained her composure, knowing the stakes were immense. Over the next hour, she navigated the intricate dance of translation and diplomacy. One investor posed a challenging scenario, a proposed partnership in Amsterdam where regulatory constraints and local expectations conflicted with the resort's usual operational model. Sebastian paused, clearly ready to answer, but Lila stepped in, translating the question carefully while also clarifying the cultural context. They are concerned that certain services may conflict with local regulations and customs. They want assurance that the resort will respect Dutch labour laws and local hospitality practices while maintaining luxury standards. The investor nodded, visibly reassured. Lila's translation wasn't just words. It conveyed empathy, awareness, and cultural intelligence. Sebastian smiled subtly, clearly impressed. Minutes turned into an hour, each exchange increasing in complexity. Lila adjusted phrasing, softened blunt statements, highlighted subtleties, and ensured that both sides felt heard and respected. Every glance from Sebastian reminded her that she was under scrutiny, but also that he trusted her instincts. Midway through, a particularly tense moment arose. A younger investor questioned pricing strategy in a tone that suggested skepticism, bordering on condescension. Lila's stomach tightened. One misstep could undo everything. She took a deep breath and translated carefully, emphasizing the value proposition while maintaining respect for the investor's perspective. The room's energy shifted. The tension eased. Heads nodded subtly. Smiles appeared where there had been skepticism. Lila allowed herself a small, private breath of relief, though her hands remained steady on the table. Sebastian leaned slightly toward her, whispering just enough for her to hear. You're doing exactly what I knew you could. Remember, instinct and empathy are stronger than words alone. She nodded discreetly, heart pounding, yet maintaining her outward calm. The rest of the meeting proceeded smoothly, with Lila translating technical details, offering cultural insight, and occasionally subtly guiding the conversation to prevent misunderstandings. By the time the discussion concluded, the investors were visibly impressed not only with Sebastian's vision, but also with Lila's presence, diplomacy, and fluency. As the investors rose, one of them shook Lila's hand with genuine warmth. I must say, your translation and guidance were remarkable. It made all the difference in understanding our concerns. Lila felt a blush rise to her cheeks but held her composure. She had done what she had trained for, Yet hearing recognition from someone so powerful filled her with quiet exhilaration. After the investors left, Sebastian turned toward her. "You saved the deal today," he said quietly, almost reverently. "Not with money, not with influence, but with insight, judgment, and presence. I saw it the moment I heard you speak yesterday." Lila felt a wave of relief and pride. This was no longer housekeeping, no longer the margins of a hotel life. She had entered a world of influence and had held her own. Later, in the elevator alone with Sebastian, she allowed herself a quiet exhale. I didn't think I could do it," she admitted softly. "You did," he replied simply, eyes fixed ahead. "And you will do more, much more. Today was just the beginning." That evening, Sebastian invited her to a quiet rooftop terrace above the city, a private space few ever saw. Stars shimmered faintly above the skyline, and the hum of traffic below was a distant whisper. They sat together, sharing wine from simple glasses, the enormity of the day slowly sinking in. Sebastian spoke softly, reflecting on his own past, recounting stories of early mistakes, lessons learned, and the rare talent he recognized in someone few would have noticed. Lila listened, feeling the weight of his words and the subtle bond forming between them. "You have a rare gift," he said finally, voice carrying a sincerity that made her chest tighten. "I could have chosen anyone, but I chose you. Not because of luck or circumstance or chance, but because you have integrity, empathy, and judgment. Qualities that cannot be taught." Lila swallowed hard. She had spent years invisible, unnoticed, yet now, for the first time, someone powerful had not only seen her skills, but valued her character. Her heart raced, not just with excitement, but with the profound realization that her life had shifted in ways she had scarcely imagined. As the night drew on, a quiet understanding passed between them. Sebastian's mentorship, trust, and attention were not merely professional, they were personal, nuanced, and transformative. Lila realized that this was more than a job. It was an opportunity to step fully into her potential and to forge a connection built on mutual respect and shared vision. The first day concluded with Lila standing on the terrace, city lights twinkling like distant stars, contemplating the journey ahead. She knew challenges would arise, tests of patience, skill, and character. But she also knew that with trust, integrity, and courage, she had the chance to excel beyond her wildest dreams. The city outside the Azure Crest Resort glimmered like a sea of diamonds, each light a story, a pulse, a heartbeat. Inside, the executive wing was quiet, yet alive with the faint hum of air conditioning, the distant clatter of room service, and the soft murmur of strategy discussions. For Lila Vermeer, the transition from housekeeping to the inner sanctum of high-stakes hospitality had been dizzying, exhilarating, and, at times, terrifying. Yet nothing prepared her for the nights that now stretched into the late hours, where work blended seamlessly with personal discovery. It had been a week since the investor meeting, and Sebastian Drake had begun relying on Lila in ways that transcended translation and etiquette. She was no longer merely a conduit of words. She was an interpreter of intention, a mediator of delicate dynamics, and, increasingly, a confidant. Each late-night session was a masterclass in leadership, negotiation, and the subtle art of human connection. On this particular evening, Lila arrived at the executive suite just after 8. The city lights shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Sebastian was already there, leaning over a sprawling map of their proposed European expansion, fingers tracing routes, landmarks, and logistical hubs. "Good evening, Lila," he said without looking up. His voice carried the same calm authority she had come to recognize, but tonight there was an undercurrent, soft curiosity, almost expectation. "Good evening, sir," she replied, placing her leather-bound notebook on the side table. Her hands trembled slightly, a habit she couldn't quite shake despite her growing confidence. Sebastian finally looked up, his grey eyes sharp, assessing, and yet softened by a faint trace of something she couldn't name. "I've been reviewing the Amsterdam property," he said, gesturing to a cluster of notes and diagrams. "We need to ensure compliance with local labour laws, zoning regulations, and the cultural expectations of clientele. But it's not just about legalities. It's about perception, service, and authenticity. I need you to think beyond language." Lila nodded, her mind already racing through cultural nuances, Dutch protocols, and European hospitality norms. She realized that this role demanded more than academic knowledge. It required intuition, empathy, and presence. "I've researched regional expectations for luxury resorts," she began, her voice measured but confident. "In Amsterdam, sustainability and authenticity are key. Guests expect integration with local culture, but also personalized service that anticipates needs without intrusion." Sebastian's gaze sharpened, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Exactly. You're seeing it the way I want it seen, not just translating words, but translating values, expectations, and priorities." The next few hours were an intricate dance. They reviewed layouts, service protocols, staff training modules, and guest experience simulations. Each decision required careful consideration, from the design of guest suites to the choice of locally sourced delicacies for the restaurant. Lila contributed observations that were precise, culturally informed, and surprisingly strategic. Sebastian listened, occasionally asking her to elaborate, challenging assumptions, and testing her resolve. At one point, he paused, leaning back in his chair, eyes distant. "Tell me, Lila, do you ever wonder why I'm involving you in this?" Her pulse quickened. I know you trust my judgment, sir. I don't know if there's any other reason." He studied her, a faint shadow of vulnerability crossing his features. "It's more than trust. I need someone who reminds me what it's like to see things clearly, without cynicism. Someone whose integrity isn't influenced by status, money, or fear. That's rare. That's why you're here." Lila's chest tightened. She had spent her life invisible, overlooked, surviving in the margins. To hear that her presence, her judgment, her empathy was not just useful, but vital, struck a chord deep within. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure if words could carry the depth of what she felt. Sebastian's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me, just continue being yourself." The remainder of the night flowed with quiet intensity. They mapped out staffing hierarchies, discussed multilingual support protocols, and debated the selection of cultural liaisons for European markets. Lila's fluency in Dutch, French, and German became a linchpin, allowing them to simulate real-world investor and guest interactions. She noticed subtle micro-expressions, cultural cues, and body language, translating not just words but intent. Yet as the clock edged toward midnight, the conversation inevitably shifted. It was no longer purely professional. Layers of personal revelation began to emerge. Sebastian shared anecdotes from his past, rare glimpses into a man otherwise shielded by authority and reputation. He spoke of his childhood, the son of a janitor who dreamed of building a hospitality empire. He spoke of failures, lost opportunities, and the immense loneliness that accompanied wealth and responsibility. Lila listened intently, sensing the rare vulnerability beneath the veneer of control. She found herself sharing fragments of her own life, the struggles of her mother's illness, the sacrifices she had made to survive, the relentless pursuit of education that had kept her afloat. She spoke of nights in the library, practicing Dutch after cleaning rooms, dreaming of opportunities that seemed forever out of reach. The connection deepened not in grand gestures, but in shared acknowledgement of perseverance, resilience, and unspoken understanding. In the glow of the city lights, the barriers between employer and employee, power and servitude began to blur. For the first time, Lila felt seen, not as a maid, not as an assistant, but as a capable, intelligent, and resourceful individual whose presence had tangible impact. At one point, Sebastian stood, moving to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I've met many people who speak multiple languages, who are talented in various skills. But rarely do I meet someone who combines talent with unshakable integrity and quiet courage. That's why I noticed you yesterday. That's why I involve you in everything from now on. Lila's eyes welled with tears, though she quickly blinked them away. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't need to say anything, he replied, turning toward her. Actions speak louder, and your actions have already spoken volumes. The night wore on, punctuated by strategy, reflection, and mutual acknowledgement. They shared insights about leadership, human behavior, and the unspoken responsibilities that came with power. Sebastian challenged her perceptions, encouraging critical thinking and problem-solving. Lila's suggestions were often met with nods of approval, sometimes with gentle questioning, but always with the underlying message that her voice mattered. By the time they wrapped up, the city outside had darkened further, the streets below quiet except for occasional headlights reflecting off wet pavement. Lila felt a profound sense of transformation, not just in her role, but in her own perception of self-worth, agency, and capability. Before leaving, Sebastian handed her a folder. This contains materials for tomorrow's European liaison briefing, he said. Review them. Your insights will be crucial. Lila accepted it with both hands. I won't let you down, she promised, her voice steady but earnest. I know, he replied softly, almost as if to himself. And I trust you to make the right decisions. Even when I'm not in the room. That's rare. That's why you're here. As she left the office, walking down corridors she once cleaned without notice, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a hotel maid practicing Dutch in the quiet of the library to a trusted associate influencing high-stakes decisions, her life had shifted in ways she never imagined. Yet, beneath the luxury, power, and strategy, the lesson was simple. Integrity, courage, and empathy could open doors that wealth and status alone could never touch. That night, lying in bed, Lila felt the quiet hum of the city seep into her consciousness. She realized that this was just the beginning. Challenges would arise, mistakes might be made, and pressures would mount. But for the first time, she had not only survived circumstances beyond her control, she had shaped them. She had proven to herself and to Sebastian that talent coupled with integrity was unstoppable. In those quiet moments before sleep, she whispered a vow to herself, to approach each day with courage, to uphold her principles, and to embrace opportunities with the confidence that she was worthy of them. The next morning would bring new challenges, new faces, and new responsibilities. But she was ready, and somewhere above in the penthouse office, Sebastian looked out at the same skyline, a rare smile tugging at his lips. For once, he felt certain of something, that in Lila he had found not only a partner for his business, but a kindred spirit whose presence reminded him of the value of trust, loyalty, and human connection. The first morning after the late-night strategy session dawned crisp and clear, with the city below bathed in golden sunlight. For Lila Vermeer, the world seemed simultaneously familiar and entirely new. The corridors of the Azure Crest Resort, once navigated with quiet anonymity, now carried a weight of expectation, responsibility, and purpose. Each step she took resonated differently. Her heels clicked against marble floors with confidence, her posture aligned with the authority she had earned, and yet her heart remained tethered to the humility that had carried her this far. Lila arrived at the executive wing earlier than usual, a habit she had cultivated over the past week. Her leather-bound folder contained the preparatory notes for the European liaison meeting, her insights meticulously organized, her translations and cultural adaptations ready for implementation. Every detail mattered: phrasing, tone, subtle gestures, even the cadence of speech. She understood that this meeting was more than a professional briefing. It was a test of perception, judgment, and poise. The moment she entered Sebastian Drake's office, she sensed an air of anticipation. Sebastian, dressed in a tailored navy suit with a crisp white shirt, stood near the panoramic windows, reviewing a set of investor dossiers. His usual calm authority was tinged with an unusual warmth. He looked up and smiled, just slightly, the kind of smile that could only mean satisfaction mixed with trust. "Good morning, Lila," he said. "Are you ready for today?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady. Inside, however, she felt a quiet fluttering of nerves. Not anxiety born of fear, but of responsibility. She understood that this day could mark a pivotal moment, not just for her career, but for her future in the very world that had seemed inaccessible until recently. Sebastian gestured toward the conference room. "The Dutch delegation arrives in 30 minutes. I want you to lead the initial introductions, set the tone, and ensure everyone feels comfortable. Your role is critical." As Lila walked toward the conference room, she reflected on her journey. A mere week ago, she had been scrubbing floors, invisible to the towering walls and polished marble corridors. Today, she would command attention, not through wealth or position, but through competence, empathy, and integrity. It was a culmination of years of perseverance, silent learning, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The conference room was a symphony of design. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a breathtaking view of the skyline. Polished oak tables reflected the soft morning light, and meticulously arranged floral arrangements added understated elegance. The Dutch delegation entered promptly, their expressions a blend of curiosity and skepticism. They were powerful investors, accustomed to authority and prestige, and yet there was a subtle tension in the air, an uncertainty about what awaited them. Lila greeted each delegate in fluent Dutch, her voice composed yet warm. As she introduced the meeting, she noted micro-expressions, gauged comfort levels, and subtly adjusted her tone to ease cultural expectations. One of the delegates, a tall man with piercing blue eyes, asked a pointed question regarding operational protocols. Before Sebastian could respond, Lila interjected, providing a nuanced explanation of the cultural and business context that allowed both parties to understand each other without misunderstanding. Sebastian observed quietly, a rare trace of admiration crossing his face. He had seen talent before, yes, but Lila's combination of skill, intuition, and integrity was unparalleled. She wasn't just translating words, she was mediating trust, building bridges between worlds that often failed to communicate. By the end of the meeting, the delegation was visibly impressed. Smiles replaced skepticism, nods replaced hesitation, and when Sebastian spoke, the room exuded a newfound alignment and mutual respect. As the delegates exited, one man extended his hand to Lila. "You have remarkable insight," he said in Dutch, "and a presence that inspires confidence. Your contributions today were invaluable." Lila smiled, a mixture of relief and pride washing over her. She had not only fulfilled her duties, but exceeded them in ways that resonated deeply with seasoned professionals. After the meeting, Sebastian walked her back to the office. He poured 2 cups of coffee, offering her the one with a quiet nod. "You did more than I could have imagined," he said. "Not just today, but throughout the entire process. I need you to know that your efforts are recognized, appreciated, and critical to our success." Lila felt a warmth spread through her chest. Recognition had always been elusive in her life, not just for accomplishments, but for the struggles, sacrifices, and perseverance that defined her journey. Sebastian's words carried weight because they were grounded in sincerity, not obligation. Later that afternoon, Lila received a message from Human Resources. She was summoned to the main office, a detail that made her pulse quicken. Walking through the familiar yet now empowering corridors, she felt a strange mixture of anticipation and curiosity. Mrs. Valerie Green, the HR director, greeted her warmly. "Lila, please have a seat. We have an announcement regarding your position." Lila's hands trembled slightly as she sat. "Yes, Mum?" Mrs. Green smiled. "Effective immediately. Your role is being elevated. You are now Director of International Strategy. Your responsibilities will include overseeing liaison teams, managing cross-cultural communications, and directly advising Mr. Drake on international operations. In addition, your compensation has been adjusted to reflect the scope of your new role." Lila's breath caught. Director. The word carried authority, prestige, and acknowledgement, but it also symbolized the validation of years of hard work, resilience, and courage. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that while her life had transformed, the principles that guided her had not. Sebastian entered shortly after, his presence commanding yet unassuming. He extended his hand toward Lila. "Congratulations! This promotion is not just for recognition, but because I trust you to shape our future, and I need someone I can rely on without question." Lila shook his hand, emotions threatening to spill over. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "I know," he replied softly. "And more than that, I know you'll continue to exceed expectations, because that's who you are." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Lila seamlessly integrated into her new role, attending high-level meetings, advising on expansion strategies, and mentoring junior staff. Yet despite the professional triumphs, it was the personal connection with Sebastian that continued to evolve. Shared late-night strategy sessions transitioned from strictly business to conversations about philosophy, values, and life experiences. They discovered mutual respect, admiration, and eventually, a quiet companionship rooted in shared integrity and understanding. One evening, Sebastian invited Lila to the rooftop garden again, a place where the city's lights stretched endlessly like constellations. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain on stone and the faint aroma of night-blooming flowers. They sat side by side, sipping wine in reflective silence. "I want you to know," Sebastian began, "that everything we've accomplished together is meaningful because you've been yourself. Your integrity, empathy, and courage have shaped outcomes more than you realize, not just in business, but in the way I see people." Lila's eyes softened, reflecting the glow of city lights. "I never expected to be seen like this, not by anyone, and certainly not by someone like you." Sebastian turned toward her, a rare vulnerability in his gaze. "You've reminded me that power isn't about control, it's about trust, and you've earned mine in ways I never anticipated." For Lila, the moment was profound. It wasn't wealth, title, or recognition that defined her transformation. It was acknowledgement, trust, and partnership. In that quiet rooftop garden, she realized that her journey had come full circle. From a hotel maid invisible to the world, to a leader, a strategist, and a person whose actions and character commanded respect. Months later, the culmination of their efforts was publicly recognized. The Azure Crest Resort announced its European expansion, highlighting Lila's contributions in press releases, interviews, and industry reports. She was not just mentioned as a participant, but as a pivotal architect of strategy and cultural integration. Her face appeared alongside Sebastian's in news articles, representing competence, integrity, and partnership. Yet, through all the accolades, Lila remained grounded. She continued mentoring staff, fostering cross-cultural understanding, and upholding the principles that had guided her since her days studying Dutch in the library. Her humility and empathy became a model for others, proving that success could be paired with integrity and that influence could be wielded with respect rather than fear. Finally, on a quiet evening after the ribbon-cutting ceremony of their first European property, Lila and Sebastian stood overlooking the canals of Amsterdam. Cameras and reporters had faded into the background. There was only the soft hum of the city, the glint of lamplights reflecting in water, and the shared understanding of two people who had navigated challenges, trust, and transformation together. Sebastian took her hand, his voice low but sincere. "Do you see now?" This isn't just about success, it's about what we can build together. Trust, partnership, and integrity. Those are the foundations that matter. Lila's eyes glistened. I understand, and I'm not walking away. Not now, not ever. In that moment, the narrative of power, wealth, and hierarchy dissolved. What remained was a profound truth. Family, partnership, and respect are not built on money, but on trust and shared values. And as the city lights shimmered, the cameras captured only a fragment of their story. The real transformation of trust, courage, and human connection was theirs alone, a testament to integrity, resilience, and the life-changing power of being seen, valued, and understood. The story spread like wildfire, not just as a tale of a hotel maid turned director, but as an emblem of hope and inspiration. Audiences resonated with the moral. Courage and integrity could transcend social divides, and moments of opportunity could forever alter a life when met with authenticity and bravery.